Hi everyone, so I'm going to be making a application to check for weather using a terminal. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to first create a brand new project. I'm just going to make a new folder on the desktop. And once I dragged it over into Visual Studio Code here, I'm going to then open up the terminal. And now I'm going to start setting up the entire project. And what I'm going to also be doing is I'm going to be using a .env file to set up a very important key that we'll be using. So I'll put a .env at the root, but I'll also have to install .env. Okay, so I'm going to double check. So I'm going to make first a new file and call it weather.ts. That's the file where we're going to put the main code in. Before we do that, let me just check the ts config. So here, I really only need something really basic. This is all I need for the compiler options. Just set all these to true here. And what I'll do next is I'll also set up a README file just so then you can see what commands I've used or we will be using. So we have set up our project using these commands, and this is the command we'll use to run our application soon. But before we do that, let's go to the package.json and just make sure that everything looks okay here. Okay. Okay, I think everything is okay. This one's just a different number, but should be okay. And okay, so I'm going to go to my .env, and this is where I'm going to have to go to the Open Weather API. So Open Weather API is just a website where you can grab this code, which we will need. Let me just show you guys what it looks like. So right here you can see that we have the Open Weather, and if I click on it, here is Open Weather, and it pretty much has these APIs to collect different information. So for the different weather forecasts throughout the week or a few weeks or hours. So I'm just going to sign in, and when you sign in, well, since you're new, you're going to have to create an account. So once you create an account and you enter in your email address and everything, then you'll be able to get an API key. So let me first log in quickly. So once you search for Open Weather, you just click on Open Weather, and then when you log in, and you can go to My API Keys, and right over here you'll see a list of all your API keys. You only need one. You may get a default one automatically. You can generate your own by just typing a title. It'll just be the title, the name of whatever you want to call it. So just type in like test or weather, whatever you want to call it, and then click generate. Don't use my API keys because I'll delete it later, but just make your own, and it will be important for your project. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to just add this API underscore key. So it has to be all uppercase with the underscore in between, and then equals to this code that you set up in quotations. Just remember, don't copy mine API key because I'll delete it later, but make sure you set up your own. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to start setting up the actual code of the weather. So here, what I want to do is we want to be able to connect to our .env, which has our environmental variable. So we need to, because we installed the .env, we can import that here, and then we're going to reference that environmental variable by setting up the variable and just calling process.env .api underscore key. So remember, this API underscore key is what we set up here. It's going to grab that value and then bring it up here to this weather.ts page. And we're just going to double check here if an API key has been given. If not, then it'll show an error key. And we're just going to set up a few weather conditions. So the 4 weather conditions will be sunny, cloudy, rainy, and snowy, and nothing other than that. And then the interface, this other interface for weather responses, will have a weather and a main, so there's some sort of description string and then the temperature number. So how we're getting this is based on the actual response from Open Weather API. So let me just show you here. Let me actually copy over the code here, and then I'll show you what I mean. So here we have this function that we're going to set up to fetch the weather, and we're going to bring in some sort of city. We're going to type in a city, and then based on this function, it'll calculate what the weather is for that location. And we're using that weather response to look at that layout. So here, if I go to this URL here, and we're going to be dealing with, let's say, we'll put Toronto or something. So let's see here. I'm going to go to the website. Okay. For right now, I'm just going to hard code this. I'll put Toronto, and I'll just grab my API key. I just want to see it in just online here. So there we go. So we got our entire URL. I'll hit enter. And you can see here this is coming from Open Weather API. And I want to be able to set up the code in a way that the way this is structured as well. You can see here we got the weather. Here it's saying the main is cloud. So this is where we are setting up the interface here. So weather description. So if we go back here, weather description, broken clouds. Okay, it's broken clouds. And then main is here, and then we're getting the temp. So temp is right there. So we're going to be grabbing that number. So you can see here we have to set up the interface the same way it's set up from the weather forecast from Open API. And I think that's enough information that we need to grab, at least for this one. So let me show you what this entire code looks like first. So in this function, you can see here that we have, we're waiting for some sort of response from this URL. So we have the base URL here for the Open Weather map. This is the base of the URL. And then we're adding these search parameters here. This is the city, which we'll be typing in the terminal and passing it over. The app ID is the API ID. So it is the one where for our environmental variable. And then we're going to put the units in metric. And I'm putting these in a backticks just so it's easier to add these $ curly brace brackets so we can pass over the values. And here we're just double checking to make sure the response is okay and there's no errors with it. And if there is, then we can set up that JSON response. And once we have set that up, we can start working on the display of the weather. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to download Postman on your computer because it's going to help you. Also, we can track to see if our API key is working with the URL link. So here, what we can do is when you have Postman installed, you could create your account and sign in, that's fine. But here we're going to be entering our URL and our keys with the values. So I'm going to go back to here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be posting, I'm going to grab this URL. And here is where I'll be adding the values. So you can see here that what I've done is I set up the URL here, and the URL has the location of whatever location, and then the API key, and then you can put the units so they can show up here as well, the key value pair. But then here, after you hit send, it will load that URL. And you can see here in the body, it'll return all the response, all the values that you need for it. So here in the main, we got the temp, and then in the weather, we got the description, and that's what we're looking for. So we know that we have that set up, and these are just some of the header information. We don't need to worry about it. The most important here is looking at the body in order to visualize and see the information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up another method that will check for the different types of weather descriptions. And so under this async function, I will set up another function. And here you can see we set up a display weather function. And it's going to try to call that fetch weather. Because we are going to still be using the city and display weather, but this one is going to fetch whatever the weather is from that API. And once it gets whatever the weather is, it'll check to see what the weather condition is. Default, it'll just be sunny. But depending on if there's a weather and the weather.length, so if there is something, well, if there's not anything, it will skip this if condition. And here the else, it'll just say no weather data available. But if there is a weather for that location, there'll be the length longer than 1 that's going to be returned to the user. So that means that the weather description, we're looking at weather position 0.description.2 lowercase. And what we're doing is we're trying to see what the description is coming back as. So you can see here, weather description, we're trying to grab these words, and there's only a certain type of words that are worded on the website. These wordings come from the Open Weather API, and you can find it on the website. Let me see here if I can find it. Description. So in the Open Weather API, you can see that there are only these types of values that are going to come back to us. So that means we can set up an enum that only allows these values. If there's any other values that come back, nothing will be displayed. So that's what we have here in our code. We have these different conditions, which we have set up above here in our enum. These are the weather conditions. We have 4 of them right now. I know there's more online, but we don't need all of them right now. And we can see here if there is, because there's more online, I group them together. So all of these 3 are the same for the cloudy icon. All of these 3 are the same for the rainy icon. So depending how you want to group things, you could do it this way. Switch statements are great for when there's multiple different cases. And this is just the default for being sunny. And that is the base of that one. Next, we want to see how we can call the value based on the terminal. Alright, so we want to be able to access the value from what we type in the terminal. So we're going to use this process.arg position 2, or it'll just be Vancouver, you'll see in a second. And we're going to call the display weather, and it's going to pass over the city that it grabs from the terminal. So the terminal, the command that we have written down in our README, it is this. So let me go to the terminal. So there we go. I can put npx ts-node weather.ts because it's calling this TypeScript file, and then you can put whatever city in quotes here. So we can see here process argv2. So we always start at 0 and 0, 1, 2, so that's 3. So then we have 0, 1, 2. So it's gonna grab this value here in the quotes, and if we don't put any quotes, it will grab default of Vancouver. But let's try to run this right now. Okay, so let me make sure I save this. Maybe I didn't save this, and save this other file, run it again. There we go. So I just forgot to save that file, but it works now. You can see weather in New York is sunny with a temperature of whatever the temperature is. So here, let's try putting nothing, and let's see if it grabs something, because it should grab the default value that we have set up here. Nice. So you can see here, if we don't put anything, it will automatically grab the value of Vancouver because we put an option here, and it'll say whatever the weather is, and then the temperature right there after at the end of the sentence. So that's how we go about setting up the weather forecast for a project here. So you can follow along, look at this code, and take some time to write down the code in case you're missing anything, and just feel free to send any questions or anything in the chat if you have any.